Hey everyone, my name is Mike Vaughn. Welcome to GVN Interviews. It's October. We're all really excited about all the really great horror stuff. So I have a really special treat. He is a legendary artist. He's best known for his work on the Goosebumps series, and that is Tim Jacobus. So thank you so much. Uh,
How's it going?
yeah, great. So jumping right in, I have a two-part question for you. Were you always like, were you a horror and sci-fi fan as a kid? And also kind of what kind of inspired you to get into pursuing art?
The first answer to the first part of the question is no, I wasn't. I was that kid who was afraid of pretty much everything. I wasn't a horror fan. I was the kid who would call his mom to pick me up at the movie theater because it was too scary, and take me back. I was more of a sci-fi guy. Now I'm of an age where Star Trek was pretty wild stuff in its day. You would sleep over your buddy's house, and on Friday night Star Trek would come on, and we'd watch that on TV. I was 16 or 17 when the first Star Wars came out. So that movie I thought was incredible. And again, it's the idea that of creating alternate universes, and being able to show people something that doesn't exist and trying to make it as real as possible. So a lot of my artwork at the beginning was along those lines, where I was just trying to create new cool places and take people on an adventure. So that's kind of in a very small nutshell.
I think it's so fascinating because hearing you say that, and I also sort of think that um like the artwork for the Goosebumps books were a little bit akin to like a really great vinyl album cover where it's like something that draws you in, it entices you, it lets your imagination kind of get carried away before you even like put that vinyl on, or in your case like open the book up to read what R.L. Stine wrote.
So I'm a child of the vinyl experience. Our album collections were as valuable of a piece of property as anything you owned. I spent more on my first stereo than I did on my first car. So the love of music, and the whole experience of having that album cover in your lap while you're listening to music, looking at liner notes, following the lyrics. And the 12 by 12 format was great for that. So that was a great place for the artist of the day to really get a chance to show off. And it was stuff that, we all talked about. And that really was the original gallery for my generation.
Nice. Yeah, it's so funny because you probably get this a lot, but I feel like your art certainly helped like an entire generation get like hooked on reading, on like scary like stuff. I think that's incredible because I was kind of a voracious reader, but like that series just sort of like cemented all the things that I was really interested in, like horror, but like at that time, very tame, obviously, like had not graduated to Stephen King quite yet.
Well, that's a different story. If you're 7 and you're reading Stephen King, there's other issues going on here. But when I decided that I wanted to do book covers as part of my career, uh, I had I had absolutely zero concept that my art would somehow encourage anybody to read. And as we got into the Goosebumps series, and I had a number of parents come up to me and say, listen, my son didn't read anything other than the cereal box at the breakfast table. And now he can't wait for the next Goosebumps to come out. And he's become, a real avid reader. And that was a great byproduct. Like I said, I had no concept of that. And now, as all these years later, it's kind of one of the more cool aspects of being part of that series is you guys now are grown-ups and coming back and saying, hey, this really did get me, first it got me, it helped me through school because I wasn't reading at all, number one, or number two, like you, where this was my on-ramp, this was my, my gateway to horror. And the Goosebumps were set up just right, little scare, but not enough to, drive you over the deep end and burn the books and climb into bed with your parents every night.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is just what I love, of course, about the books and your artwork is there's always that sense of humor. There's always that little bit of like cheeky sort of like wink wink. And it's really interesting. And when I mean, because I know like you only got basically like sometimes maybe even just a sentence or two, to craft your cover. But I was kind of curious, as the series went on, did you read the books, and then did that, his writing style kind of help inform your covers at all going forward?
So yeah, I did get Bob was writing the book at the same time I was doing the cover. So even if they wanted to give me a book, it didn't exist at that point. So depending on where he was in the process, he would share what he had. And it was, it was never more than a couple of paragraphs, and it was as little as a couple of sentences. From a creative aspect, I found that to be more liberating, more freeing, because if you give me a lot of information, I'm going to be compelled to put that information in because that's my job. I'm the author's conduit. I'm conveying what he's writing into something visual. So I'll feel, almost constrained by more detail. So the less detail you give me, then I can kind of run wild. It's like, well, you didn't tell me I can't do that. So I would start to just put stuff out. And it was funny because I didn't know how any of the Goosebumps books ended. And we did pretty good at the cover staying relatively true to the story. And I didn't tip the cart and give away too much or do something that was completely out of left field. But your point about there being a sense of humor to the books, that was a big thing that RL was trying to do. I didn't know it. We actually didn't meet and start talking and being friends until we had been in the series for almost 2 years.
Wow.
And when we did get together, I started to learn who he was, and that he was originally a humor writer, and that there was this element of funny in the Goosebumps covers. So when we got to Say Cheese and Die, right there I went, oh, I get it. This is, the title alone, first it makes you laugh every time you hear it. And it gave me that, oh, okay, that's what we're doing here. This isn't pure horror, and there can be a comic element in it. And whenever possible, without being ridiculous. Well, we did a lot of ridiculous stuff. So, but humor wasn't off limits. So that was a great thing to always have in the back of my head when I was producing the covers. I would go to schools and libraries. This is in the 90s now, and speak to, rooms full of kids. And, the question always is, what's your favorite cover? And then I started to get okay, well, that's your favorite cover. What's your favorite story? And early on, I didn't read any of them. And I was like, oh crap, I got to go back. I got to get a few of these under my belt and, start to absorb a few so I can talk intelligently on this. And back then, but just more recently, I went back and read a Goosebumps book. And they're not for me. They weren't created for me, but they've got just they're just a fun ride. And the pacing of the story, the structure, the hooks at the end of every chapter to make you go farther and start the next chapter and get you scared and then tell you a joke and then at the end throw a little twist on it. And they're great. You know, they're fun. And even for, you know, someone, you know, who's not in the market and someone who doesn't even have hair, it's still a great read.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think that had I gone back and read it now as an adult, it probably wouldn't hold up. But again, I certainly think that like so now my nieces are getting into these books and stuff because I feel like that's kind of my duty as an uncle to but anyways, yeah, I think they very much hit a very certain demographic. Now I'm kind of curious,
But
like
one more point before you leave
oh,
that. But yes, they're not for you. But if you had to sit down, I don't know how old your nieces are, but if you sat down and you read to them, you would roll right into it. You'd go,
yeah.
oh yeah, I remember this is good. You know, you'd watch them getting excited or scared or both, and you would pick up on it right away. So you are not the demographic, but you can, you know, you can still jump on the ride.
Oh yeah, and it's so funny because like I was like when I was doing research for this, I was like going back. Of course, I'm looking at some of the artwork and like some of the concept designs and stuff. And it's so funny because it's just like we were talking about like music and album covers. It's like when I look at these covers, like I can just remember when I first saw these like begging my parents to buy them for me. I think they were just happy that I was interested in reading. So, but it's so funny because it's just one of those very strong sense memories that you get, like a good album or something.
Yeah, and that's a I'm really fascinated by that now that I'm getting a little bit older. Is what, you know, there are things that are, you know, are just, they're hardwired in, and they don't seem like they were a long time ago, even though they were way long. And then there's other things that people tell me, oh yeah, you were there and you did this, and I got zero, I got nothing, I have no recollection whatsoever. So I find with me, a lot of my memories have a strong visual component to them. So if there was something that happened and there was a great visual that went along with the event, it could be a sporting event, it could be anything, but if there's some sort of visual, those seem to sit themselves better than, I was out to dinner with friends and somebody told a funny story. I'm not hanging on to that one.
Yeah. Absolutely. Now I'm kind of curious, now you have like maybe like I said, it's a paragraph, maybe it's a couple of sentences. Now at that point in the process, were you just kind of left alone? Like did you have to like did anybody have to sign off on like anything?
Yeah, so I worked with an art director.
Hmm.
She would be the one who would send me here's the one sentence, and if she had an idea, she would share it with me. Most times it was, we would talk a little bit, and we were always kind of on, well, we got to do something in this vein. And they really did let me kind of do what I wanted. So if you're looking at the Art of Goosebumps book, you can see that, I basically tried to do 3 different concepts for each of the books, doing something that in some cases it was something that was suggested to me. So I make sure you do that one first. Then I would do, something that would be a variation on that maybe. And then the third one would always be 100%. This is what I think we should do. And it wasn't that they pick my ideas more or less. But they would just pick. It was never, it's kind of close. Can you do, give us another couple of sketches? You run into that a lot. And that didn't happen in the Goosebumps scenario. It was just, yeah, like number 2, go ahead, finish, go ahead and do that sketch, turn it into a painting. And that would be the last time anybody would talk to me until the art was done. And I would send it in, and out of the 100+ Goosebumps covers I did, I only had to change one or two. One. So, they liked what I was delivering, and we were putting out one book a month there at the beginning.
Yeah.
So there's not a lot of time. Like, we got to get to the next one because that's coming up quick. So let's not fool around. Let's get this one good enough out the door. Let's do the next one.
Yeah. Now, I mean, and that's just, it's so incredible and mind-boggling when you kind of think about that. Not only having a beautiful piece, done and created in that time constraint, but also just like, R.L. Stine writing one book a month.
Only because, and maybe he would feel the same way, but I sit here from my side going, I had the easy part, drawing comes natural to me. The idea of writing a full book in that type of time frame, forget it. That would be, that's not happening. That's not happening in triple the time period for me. And it would be stressful, where what I do, I've been doing it long enough to where even if we start off and it's not gelling, I know it's going to, and I'm not freaking out, and I'm not, pounding my head against the wall or doing any craziness. I know it's all going to come around eventually.
Yeah. And now, speaking of that, like, you sometimes would have like maybe a couple weeks to turn around a thing. Is that
so we were on again, the cycle ran for 1 month. So there were certain dates where the painting had to be, in production and heading to the printer. Then the printers would make it up, and then they would be, the idea was have the book out at the beginning of the month, just as a, that's our mark. So next one would start. I would get the concepts. I would have, I would have 2 weeks, but I would do it in a week's time. So I maybe do the sketch, turn them in, and I'm working on multiple covers. I didn't just do Goosebumps covers. I did other stuff at the same time. So while that's in, I may start another set of sketches. Then when they give me the okay, I put that aside, and then I concentrate doing the cover. I never worked on multiple covers at the same time, like moving one on the easel and one off. I always just said, okay, this is the one. We're doing this now. And it would just crank out. And it would be done in, less than a week's time. But it was a straightforward shot.
Yeah, no, that's pretty fascinating. It's funny coming back to like Stephen King. I once read that he, and as someone who writes for a living, I find it's very difficult, but he would say he would set aside, X amount of hours a day just to strictly do writing. Was that something that you would do?
Oh yeah. No, this is, you have to, in order to get better or be good or like, this is a job. There's I don't want to get too far off on another tangent, but once you pick this and this becomes your thing, right now, so my work schedule now is still crazy. I get up at 4 a.m. Wow. And I work out, and then I sit down and I'm working by 6 a.m. I find I'm better in the early morning hours than I am in the late evening hours. And, I try to put in a 12-hour day between my art directing job and still doing some illustration work. I always look at, the voice in my head goes, if I'm not sitting here, I'm not making any money. If you're walking around the house or you're putzing around with other things, and you can't do both. So the longer I sit here, the better off it is financially. Now, I have a tendency to be, maybe I'm sure there's plenty of people in my life that would say I may have some workaholic tendencies to what I do. And you also have to go, all right, every once in a while, you got to go, all right, you got to dial this down, get up, go do something else, go visit. You can't keep telling, people that you can't show up to their kid's birthday party, even though you don't want to go to the kid's birthday party. You got to show up. So, yeah, I actually look at the way I focus on my art more as if it was a workout or I was training. I'm an athlete, and I know I've got to do X amount of push-ups in the morning to get myself going. Then once we get going, I got to be working on my skills the whole time, and that these are non-negotiable hours. And the thing you have to figure out is how to do this when you're not really thrilled about doing it. And what I've learned over the years is for me, it's not whether I want to or don't want to. I'm okay with that. It's just days where you sit down and, for a lack of better terms, you suck. Just everything I put down is garbage, but don't get up and go, oh, today's not a good day, I'm going to go do something else. Keep pounding at it. It may not come around, but the next day or a day and a half later, it all kicks in. And then you start to have those really good days. And you go, oh, okay, well, I just got to hang here until the ship makes a turn and comes around again. And looking at it more as if this was a workout at the gym, that I am going to be healthier mentally if I sit here and get this stuff done than if I don't do this.
Yeah, no, that's like a kind of a great way to put it. I know that I definitely find that as a writer where, yeah, you're exactly right. There's days when I'm like, I feel like I can't string a sentence together. But yeah, you're 100% right. You just kind of have to push past that. And
and even if you, I mean, as a writer, I know I put stuff down where I'm just drawing and I'm going, it's garbage. And I'm sure if you're writing, you can just go, what I'm writing right now is not very good. What I'm writing right now is not very good. But you are actively writing. And at some point, something's going to kick in. And and like you say, there's days where it's good, and then there's days where it's not. And the more you do it, the more those days are good. And even when you may not be 100% on your game, you're still creating acceptable stuff that you can go back the next day and go, all right, this wasn't my best, but I can clean this up, and this is something I can work with.
Yeah. It's so funny because like if I'm, for example, I am also not an evening, I'm not very good like after 9 p.m. Because like I can tell when I'm doing an all-nighter and I'm writing something like well into 1 a.m., 2 a.m., I'll go back in the morning and say, what crazy person wrote this? And that's why I don't do that anymore. But
and there's something to be said. I mean, we've all had those killer deadlines, and sometimes you have to do that. And what I found is that if you only have to do those occasionally, and you have to force yourself to get that late night thing done, or that around the clock thing, you can do it. But if you then tell yourself, oh, I can do this, and you do it again 2 weeks later, there's going to be diminishing returns. And if you do it then a week later, there's going to be even less. If you're forced into it occasionally, you can kind of ride over the hump, but you got to go tell yourself, this isn't the way to work it.
Yeah.
You know, whatever I need to do to be, you know, get up earlier or whatever, you know, go to bed earlier the night before and kick off fresh or whatever you're, you know, we all have something that we do that we shouldn't spend as much time on
Yeah.
that takes away from this stuff.
Yeah, and that, I mean, I think that's kind of brilliant advice for really anybody, especially, you know, artists or writers or something where you're in a job where you don't necessarily, you kind of do set your own hours, even though you do have X amount you need to do, you need to turn things in, deadlines, all that good stuff. Yeah, I think just like you know, discipline is kind of like the key, you would probably say then.
Oh, so much so, and I think that's it. I think that's a mistake that a lot of people in the creative fields do. Is I don't know where this all started. That somebody said, "Oh, you know, I wait till I'm inspired," or you know, like there, it's okay if you know I do it only in the middle of the night when I'm you know when I'm at my best or whatever. I think it's a bad, you know, it's a bad structure to start out with. And I think if you go, I want to be, I want to be the best snowboarder that there is. Well, then you better get up and get working out and do everything that you need to do to make your legs stronger. To then, when you hit the slopes, you're going to be good. And if you want to be a world class or an Olympic snowboarder, you got to put in the hours. And again, you know, everybody talks about this 10,000 hour thing. There's a lot to be said for that.
Yeah.
And so again, if we get away from that, oh, I'm waiting for the muse or I'm waiting to get inspired, you're way better off because there's nothing better. And it happens a lot where you sit down and you go, I don't feel like doing this at all. And you start into it and you get an hour into it and all of a sudden it starts to click and you start to get to some momentum and you come up with an idea and you turn the corner and you got something. There's nothing more victorious than those days where you kept going, I really wanted to stop, but you got something come the end of the day. That's the real victory. You know, getting up and feeling like you're doing it or waking up with a great idea. That's wonderful, but having to hammer at it and concoct an idea and, you know, put those little tiny nuggets together and go, oh, there it is. There it is. I got an idea. I'm sure it's the same with writing where you just, you know, there are days where you have it. It's there. It's all being presented to you from, you know, from nowhere. And it's like, okay, that's great. But it's the other days where, you know, for me, I got to see it in my head first. And then it can, you know, then it can move down my hand and onto the paper. But if I don't see it, then it's not happening. So, yeah, that's something because I've had to spend so much time at this that's really a lot easier. You know, I know that the idea may not thrill you at first, but put it down anyway. You know, like there's something there, you're thinking about it, and then what is it you like? Save that part, and what can we change to make it better? What spin can we put on it? And you know, a lot of times it's like, yeah, you've done something like that before. Where can we go with this that will make it different and better or unique?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I also 100% agree with you on like finding it very funny when I do hear stuff like, oh, you know, I have to be inspired or it just has to be like the inspiration is not starving to death sometimes. Right?
I was just going to say my line used to be, if I want inspiration, I'll walk out to the mailbox and it'll be full of bills. And there's my inspiration that I got to get going.
Yeah. And it, you know, it's like if I'm not working on like a review or like something like that, I'm trying to write something every day. Like I'm trying to do that where I devote X amount of hours on like what I'm trying to.
That's awesome. And that is that I think that's that's a key, is that your car. I say that to people who are, who do, do their creative endeavor on the side. They have a job or they have family and kids, and it's like, okay, well then you put something in place here the same way it would be if you went to the gym from 6 until 8 Monday through Friday. This is what I do, and it's non-negotiable. Your family knows about it, everybody knows about it, and you put in that time in those hours, and you just get into the habit. And once you're in the habit, it gets easier. At first it sucks because you're not in the habit, and you're going, again, I don't want to do this. I want to do something else. I want to watch TV. I want to have a beer, whatever it is. And so setting up those parameters is so important. The other thing that people get hung up on, and I've looked at this I'm looking at it back the other way. So you're an individual who's got a good job, that pays well, and it's good enough that you pay your bills, but it doesn't you don't work 150 hours a week, and it allows you some time to pursue your thing, writing, art. I'm just going to go with art because that's what I know. And that job facilitates the time that you get to be creative. People are always going, yeah, but I want to be the full-time artist. And that's the most important thing. And I'm on the outside looking back the other way and going, well, not really. That's, because soon as you change it over and it's your full-time occupation, there's something that gets given up there, where if you have something else that pays your bills and you're doing that as a passion, you have a different perspective on what you're doing. I don't know what's right. I don't know what's wrong. I'm just telling you that end all be all isn't to tell somebody, oh, I'm a full-time fill in the blank. It's, what you want to be able to do is go, hey, here's my new book, or here's my new piece of art that I did, whether you did that, 9 to 5, or that's just, again, the thing isn't, it doesn't have to be the thing that pays your bills to get all the enjoyment out of it. And I'm thinking maybe, only because I'm not there and I'm looking back out over the fence the other way, that there might be some real value to doing it for the love of it, and not because I really need to make enough for the electric bill.
Yeah, no, that is so spot on, because it's interesting, because I I love writing, of course, but when you do it professionally, it is great, and it still, really fulfills that creative itch you have. But you're 100% right. There is something where your hobby is now your profession, and that is such a weird like
Yes.
line to walk.
And because when your whole life up until that point, you're doing it out of sheer passion for doing it. You just want, that's the thing you want to do when you get the opportunity to do it. And then somebody saying, all right, you get to do that. My example is, it's a baseball metaphor. Come the end of the season, Aaron Judge is sick of playing fucking baseball. He is so over it come the end of the season. He wants to go play golf or whatever he wants to do. And I don't care what you do for a living or do all the time. There is, think of the most fun thing that you would like to do. I like to go watch the Yankees play in Yankee Stadium. But if that was my full-time job, that would suck. So again, that's it. It's that, oh, I have to do it all the time thing that that does change your perspective.
Yeah, that's kind of why I sometimes will sell some pieces of art. I mean, I've sold some oil paintings. Like I try to do some stuff that's a little more like I don't want to say hobbyish to demean some of the
Yeah,
like
yeah.
smaller scale stuff that I do, but Yeah, I've definitely sold some pieces, but I like to keep art as like a fun hobby that can still just be something that I tinker around with. I do stuff I like. I don't know how it is for you, but I feel like art is a great way to just get out of my own head.
Yes.
And yeah, like it's one of those things that like you really don't have a lot of control over a lot of things, but you have control over what you're
That's a
creating.
good one. That's a good one. Actually, you don't have control over much at all.
Yeah.
You can control what comes out of your mouth, and you can control what you put in your mouth. And after that, there's not a whole lot of
Yeah.
you can control. So yeah, it's nice to be able to step away, because you can't, with art especially, you have to focus on that, which means then you have to stop thinking about all those other things that may be going on in your life and pay attention to this. And it's a great, like you say, it's a great escape. And it's a it's it's an interesting exercise for people who don't do it, because again, it makes you think different. It's, I equate it to when you go out, you leave your phone at home and you take a nice long walk.
Hmm.
And then your brain, at first you're thinking about, yeah, and I got to do this and I got to do that. And, oh, yeah, I got to go pick up the dry cleaning, and man, the brakes on the car. And, and then after a while, like that starts to all dissolve away. And then your thoughts just kind of are random and fleeting. And then you start to think about things that, I don't, remember that kid who used to be in my class when I was in middle school, who had the funny haircut? What was his name? Like it's minutia, but it's great for your brain to go into those places and kind of flush it out and let the synapses fire in a different way.
Yeah, absolutely. I was kind of curious, there's sort of that famous quote that like art is never finished, it's only abandoned. And I was kind of curious if you ever, if there was ever covers that you were like, boy, if I could have just tweaked this or done this differently. Have you ever had that?
Early on, in my illustration career, I had a real problem with uh, uh, calling something finished. So for the most part, when there's a book cover, well, it has a deadline and you hand it off, and that's it. You give it to somebody else, and once it's out of your hands, okay, I can live with it. It's not here. But I would. So my ex-wife, she said, oh, I would like a painting for my birthday. Okay, I do a painting and we hang it up over the couch. And then when she's not there and I'm working on something else and I walk by it and I go, I don't like that. And I would take it back down and I would work on it some more, and then I'd hang it back up. And this would go on and on and on. And, now the painting's morphing into something else. And even she would be like, I see you couldn't leave that alone. So I started to put my paintings under glass, because it was way more work to take it down, get it out of the frame. So it forced me to go, that's it. Once it's in the frame and there's glass on it, you can't just pull it down, because I used to not put glass on them and I could just take it down and work on it in 2 seconds and hang it back up. I have less of that. I wish I had a chance to do more. It's only ones where you have a real tight deadline, and if you had another few hours, you could. And it's never the key element in the painting. It's always some secondary item where you go, oh, I could have made this part of the background a little more rich, and given it more depth, and the people would have experienced this a little bit different. But no, I've never. I mean, I did paintings way early in my career that pop up on the internet once in a while, and it just makes me go, oh man. Oh yeah, it's just like oofa. But but again, I've also gotten to the point in my career where I look at it and I go, listen, dude, that was the best you could do. at the moment, and you were learning how to catch deadlines and get done and all that stuff, and you tried something and it was a bold failure, but you tried something there. And again, they weren't failures because when I turned them in, the art director thought it was good enough. So yeah, there's pieces early on that make me go, that could have been better. There's times where, yeah, the Goosebumps cover, A Night in Terror Tower. I had to do that in one sitting. Wow. So yeah, so like I said, a painting will take you 20, 30 hours. So instead of spreading that out over a normal day, I did what we talked about earlier. I had to get it done overnight. And when I got done, first off, I was like, that ain't bad for, cranking this thing out overnight. But then there's the hallway that's behind the Terror Tower guy could have had more intricacies or more, an interesting, like, I can see down the hall more and I can see some lights going on behind him or something. But that would have been the only place where I would have liked to add some extra special stuff. I made sure that he was done in an adequate fashion so that when I turned it in, it was good enough.
Yeah, and I think it's a great cover, and it's so interesting because I'm sure you heard the famous story about the painting for The Thing was that Drew Struzan? That like he did that on maybe he did an all-nighter, I think, did that in maybe probably what you would say is one sitting, maybe overnight, even just crank this thing out, and it's kind of wild.
Yeah, because sometimes that's a good exercise. And again, we talked earlier on how that's not a good position to put yourself in. But when you're put in that position, it's like, all right, this is it. This is what we have, and we're going to make the best of the situation and give it your best. And it can be a good exercise because it makes you go, do I need to spend more time on that part, or should I be moving on to this part? And it makes the decision making a little more focused, a little more razor's edge, and you go, yeah, that's good enough. I can move back to that. And if I get this main part done, I can go back when I'm looking at my watch, because I literally hop in the car and drove it to New York City at a specific area to drop it on the desk of the client. So yeah, it's a good exercise once in a while, but you shouldn't be putting yourself in that because, again, there are times where you're not making your best decisions at 3 a.m.
Yeah. I don't think many good decisions happen at 3 a.m., but that's a different topic. But anyways, so I'm kind of curious, did Scholastics ever give you a guideline, or was there just a general sort of thing to follow? I know pretty famously there's never red blood. If there was anything, it would be green blood, or
we never sat down and there was no list. But I once you see who the kids are, the age group was, the focus group I think was 7 to 11, if I remember the original conversations that we had. So you know where kids are at. And yeah, and the stories never, they were never presented that way. This kid got hurt, or, you knew not to put blood in any, and that's not even a Goosebumps thing. That was kind of standard for the young adult book market. It's we're not going to do that. You're not going to sell those books, and you can do that when everybody grows up. You can get as gory as you want to get when they grow up, but for right now, let's keep it chill. And no, I never had any. None of the ideas ever were, that's too much. Can you tone that down? That's too scary. Again, my art isn't ultra realistic, so there's a little bit of a comic book element, or I never been able to put it into words, but it's not the cover of the barking ghost. It's just a dog's face with the fangs sticking out. And yes, it's kind of realistic, but you're never going to look at it and go, "Ooh, is that a photograph?" Or that's, it's like, no, this is concocted. This is this is somebody's idea of what a scary dog is. So I didn't have to do a lot to tone it down because it's naturally that way.
Yeah, and it's so interesting when you say about like a comic book style, because I kind of even sort of liken it to like maybe like the 50s EC comic stuff before they became before they became real graphic. It's almost something that is, again, kind of pulpy, playful, not at all serious.
Yeah.
Were you a fan of like the EC comics? Were you
Yes and no. I mean, I was exposed to them. So the guy who lived next door to me, he had the older brothers, and they had all the cool stuff over there. And I only had sisters, so not a lot of cool stuff at my house. So we used to, yes, I was exposed to the comic books and that stuff. I don't know where my style came from. I'm sure it's from every single thing that I ever looked at was what made an impression. And somewhere back there, yeah, that was what I was exposed to. I was, I'm 63. When Goosebumps came out, I was 32, 33 when I was working on it. So yeah, I was a 60s kid, and the art that I saw was 60s style. So yes, it's got to be from what I was exposed to back then, kind of planted some of those seeds.
Nice. Yeah, because it's interesting how, like, obviously I didn't connect with that right away, but as I got older and as I started to explore more like comics and different art styles, you could definitely like I mean, it's not like it's derivative of like the EC comics, but it's sort of that flavor. It's kind of like that,
Yeah.
like I said, the humor and everything. So
Yeah, and it was the exaggerations part of it. There was art out there of mine, and I was never doing that anywhere else. It wasn't until the Goosebumps thing came along where it was like, oh, let's tweak all this. Let's exaggerate this more. Let's play with the perspective more. Let's jack up the colors. Let's, like all things that I knew how to do and had done on smaller scale and less obvious. Once we got into the Goosebumps thing, it was like, all right, let's dial all these dials up and see what happens. So my Goosebumps stuff definitely looks different than most of my earlier stuff or stuff that I did simultaneous with Goosebumps. Now, people, that's what they want. When they call and reach out and are looking for me to do an illustration project, they're all you guys. I was a Goosebumps fan when I was a kid, and I've got a new band, and we're doing a new album, and we love your art, and can you do the cover? And we would like it to be like a Goosebumps. So yeah, I love it. I'm not tired of it. I'm not sick of it. I'm not any of that. It's more challenging now because I've done so many images. I don't want to repeat anything, or and especially if someone calls me up and goes, oh, on my album I want you to do I want to do a ventriloquist dummy with dark hair. It's like, yeah, no, we got to come up with something else. We'll come up with something else, but we ain't doing that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, that would be kind of nerve-wracking because again, you don't want to be, almost copying yourself, I guess, if that's
right. It's funny, there's a lean you want to do. Yeah. Okay, I'm a chef, and everybody comes to my restaurant because I make Mexican food. Now, I don't want to, I want to branch out and do more stuff, but people are coming there for Mexican food, so I can't just start doing Italian food and make it work. So I know I gotta, it's gotta be cheese, and it's gonna be ground meat, and it's gonna be, so that I fit into that thing. But then I gotta put the flair on it from there and make it something different.
Yeah, and I mean the legacy of Goosebumps, and especially how we're in this really interesting cycle. Like there's like a theory of like the nostalgia cycle is always 20 or 30 years removed. So now I don't want to say it because it makes me feel old, but we are getting
Oh,
to
it's 100% true. The nostalgia cycle on this is hard. This
yeah.
is I was invisible for a lot of years. Nobody reached out. Nobody said anything. And in the in the past 10 years, it's been crazy how it's ramped up from an occasional email to it's daily now. And the idea that I've been invited to comic conventions and people will come to the table, I still sit there and shake my head going, this is crazy.
Yeah. I think it was like a few years back there was an artist who was doing like loving homages to the Goosebumps covers, but with like a modern twist. Did you see? I don't know if you
There's
saw
been a
that.
few of those, but yeah, I like any a variation on it. I listen, there's people who are just learning how to draw and paint, and I know they do it. They put the piece next to them and they try to copy it. Nothing wrong with that. That to me is exactly the same way as if I didn't know how to cook something, I'm going to open up the cookbook and I'm going to read the ingredients and I'm going to make my cake that tastes like a cake the first time. And then after that, if I want to play around and throw more coconut in or do something different, that's how you learn. But I love when people take the Goosebumps stuff and then they reinvent it and they put their own spin on it or their own style on it. That's super flattering, and it's a cool exercise because I get to see what they've done with it, and you go, oh yeah, I like that. That's cool.
Now you mentioned conventions, and that's a really nice segue into my next question, which was, you've of course done conventions in the past. What's the most weird or surreal or even touching sort of like fan interaction that you've had so far?
It's all it's that was the one thing. I'm not going to pick out one person and say, oh, this happened, and but what caught me off guard was, when the idea of going to a comic convention came along, I was talked into my first one. I was like, I don't know. I was like, is really anybody going to care whether I was here or not? And I do have other things I need to do, but all right. So somebody talked me into going to my very first one, which was a local con. And in my head, I said, if all the people who come up to the booth, again, this was a very local convention. I said, if I know all the people who show up, if it's, we went to high school together, or I live down the street, or I read that you were going to be here, then I wasn't going to come at any. That was going to be it. I was going to stop right there. But if some strangers came up and said, oh, I read Goosebumps, or I remember Goosebumps, or something, I just needed a handful of people that were there not because of me, they were there because of the Goosebumps stuff. Then maybe there's something here. And that's all it was. I mean, there was one person, two people, I take that back, two people that I knew that didn't come to see me, but they happened to be there, and we all had a nice little reunion. But then I moved out to other places, and again, I'm going, I'm not sure about this stuff. But then when you get out there and it's all heartfelt, that was the part that caught me off guard. Was people would come up and everybody has some sort of story, and it's something that they remember fondly. That's something they remember vividly, and it's was way more on an emotional level than it was on a, I like your art and I think it's cool. And, like there's a whole backstory to the whole thing. And it was, it was way fun for me too, to go, holy crap, I didn't know any of this stuff was going on. I was just the guy sitting at home, no internet, no anything. I knew Goosebumps was popular, but just painting the paintings and throwing them over the fence and hoping people like them. And here, all these years later, you get to hear how much it did mean to people. And that's been the huge takeaway that I never, ever anticipated.
Yeah, no, that's great. I know before we were recording, I was saying that I used to be that kid that would try to copy the covers and
Awesome.
the
I did that.
um
That's how I had my artist of the day that I would copy, and that's how you get good.
yeah. And yeah, again, that's so awesome because you do. I mean, I think everybody wants to feel like they inspired somebody or made their mark or just made this place a little bit better. And I definitely think your artwork certainly did that,
Oh,
inspired kids to read, inspired people like of a certain age, because my joints are all achy now. As I said, it's so funny because they always talk about like R.L. Stein being like the training bra for Stephen King or like other authors. And I mean, I think that's pretty apt. And I think, what draws you in first is that enticing cover, right? Like just like, you would see like the amazing like EC comics and just stuff like that. Or, we're even going back to like vinyls. I mean, the art sells the music
yeah,
sometimes.
yeah. Oh, it would get you to pick it up. If there's good art on it, an album, you're going to go, I don't know what this is. I'm going to look at it. You learn real quick that you can't just buy, you don't buy art. I mean, you don't buy albums and you don't buy wine just because they got a cool label on them, because it doesn't always pan out. You got to read it a little, see if there's a couple extra things on there where you can go, all right, I think I can give this a go. But yeah, it's again, the other fun part about this is when this first went down in the 90s, you were 10 or 11 years old. And even if you came to a book signing at a Barnes and Noble and I was there, you would be there with your mom and you would say, shyly, oh, I like your art, or I like, what's R.L. Stein like, or whatever. And we would have a little conversation and it would be fine, but we weren't relating in any real fashion. Here we are all these years later, you're a grown up, I'm a grown up, and we're having a whole different conversation about a subject matter that so many facts about. And, it was a huge part of my life. And the fact that we both know all these silly, random facts and figures over something from 30 years ago it's so much more fun now when you're grown up, and it's a lot of laughs, and it's nice, like you said, it is very rewarding that I did this stuff, I got into it to make a living doing something that I like to do, and the byproduct has been that it meant it a lot to you guys too, so that it's again, I will talk about this until you guys all disappear or I disappear, whoever disappears first. But right now it is it's amazing.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. So my final question is, like what is the one like IP that you would love to work on? Like if there is there like a dream like project that you could if you could pick anything, what would that be?
There's not a product or a thing. If anything comes my way, of course I'm interested in do it. And sometimes just because it's a thing, sometimes you're not a good fit, and that doesn't make it a success or a failure. It's just what it is. I'll give a good example, and I can only say so much because I signed some NDAs. So a very famous rap artist who has a clothing line reached out to me and said, "Oh, I want you to help me design my graphics for my clothing line." And I'm going, "Yeah, I mean, I will, but we're not. I'm not seeing what you're seeing." And so we did some ideas. We went back and forth. I, said, "Okay, this is what I got. This is what they got." And then at the end, we all kind of agreed, just went, "Yeah, this isn't quite it." Like this isn't a match. And I wasn't offended that what I was doing wasn't working for them. They weren't, I don't think they, we all tried. And so sometimes things don't sync up, and that's not a failure. That's just the way it is. So back to your other thing is, there's nothing out there where I said, "Oh, I got to do the next Halloween movie poster." It's not like that. If it came my way, yeah, let's jump on it. I've gotten a chance to do everything that I ever wanted to do. When I was in art school, I wanted to do a Stephen King cover because Stephen King was the king in, I was in art school in 1979, 78, 79, 80, and 81. There was nobody bigger than Stephen King. There was no other name that anybody knew. And there was Frank Frazetta. He was the artist that everybody wanted to copy. And Stephen King was the author you wanted to do something for. And that hung in there for a while. And then back, I forget what year it was, but I did get an opportunity to do a cover for a Stephen King book.
Nice.
I was thrilled. It was so cool, so I've been able to kind of, I've punched that ticket too many times. I'm so happy I'm still on the ride. There's, they should have already kicked me off a long time ago. And the fact that I'm still, there's always work on the board. There's still interest. I mean, you reached out to me because you thought there would be interest in talking to me, and that the people who listen to you would find interest in it. I'm on borrowed time. I am so, so should have been done by now, and everybody should have been sick of me, and I should have been just doing this for my own self-interest. And it's nice. It's really, really nice.
Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, and I think that's kind of just a really wonderful note to sort of end this one, because yeah, I just, it's so like I said, I've really enjoyed your work over the years. And you have the new book that has been selling like hotcakes. That's awesome. And I was also wondering, like, is there any like convention dates coming up? Anything that you can plug for?
So this is the time of the year when you're setting all your dates for 2023. So I reached out to a whole bunch of people with, hey, can I, I'd like to be here. I'd like to be here. I don't have any confirmations. So they'll come in the next couple of weeks. So I don't want to say I might be here and I might be there. The only one that I'm sure of is Columbus, Ohio, December 3rd, I think 3rd through 6th. And that's the last one of 2022. And that's a GalaxyCon. Should be a lot of fun. Midwest is always great. Great people out there. So that's the last one for 2022.
Awesome. Well, I'll be sure to link that information in the description. Awesome. And that way you can like meet this absolute legend. Gosh, thank you so much. This was a blast getting to talk to you. And again, I really appreciate your time.
Thanks for reaching out. That was my pleasure.
Absolutely.